Thank you everybody for joining. We're going to start back up here with our research talks. So for our research hour, we have got 3 speakers lined up. The first will be Michael, the next one will be Julie, and then it'll conclude with Lisa. And as always, if you stick around to the end, we will be doing a raffle item giveaway. So with that, I will remind all presenters for this hour that you are attending as an attendee, and as your scheduled presentation times come up, you will be promoted to a panelist where you will be displayed on screen here with me. So without further ado, we have got Michael Kwan coming from Washington State University, who is up first. Hi, Michael.
Hi, hear me okay?
I can.
Oh, okay, that's great.
And I'm just going to give you a little notification here to start your video.
Uh-huh. So you want me to start my video now?
Yeah, just so we can see you during your presentation talk. Perfect.
Okay, is that okay?
Yeah, I can see you great.
Great.
Awesome. And do you have slides to share this morning?
Yep.
Perfect. So without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself and go through your research talk. So you've got the stage here, Michael.
Okay, so you want me to start?
Yep, go right ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Chen. I'm a professor at Oregon State University. Uh, So what I'm going to report today is about crop load on the quality of grape and wine and quality evaluation. Actually, this is a much larger project led by Patty Skinkis. The project involved many industry partners, both in the commercial wineries, the vineyard managers for quite a number of years. The number of other part of the research has been funded by like Oregon Wine Board, AVF, as well as other agencies. My part is focused about the chemical composition, which was funded by Northwest Small Fruit Center. So I will give a brief conclusion about the work. Well, the first, I want to very quickly introduce the crop load. Crop load is a balance of vegetative growth and crop growth. The vegetative growth is for the grapevine, the maintenance, as well as for next year's crop. On the other hand, with the crop growth, we want to make sure we have a good fruit size and a good quality of the grapes. For many years, it's generally perceived that grapes from low yield grapevine, we can produce a higher quality of wine. So the crop load is managed by cluster thinning, and this can be done in the lag phase or some of the later lag developing green grapes can be removed at the rising stage. In Oregon, the commercial vineyard typically remove anywhere between 25 or even 50% of vine's total fruit each year. This is a very expensive management practice. It's also the result, the quality from crop thinning and grape and wine composition are inconsistent. So the study for this project, and specifically, we wanted to understand the effect of different crop thinning level on quality parameters and the composition of Pinot Noir and wine. The project has a very wide collaboration with the commercial vineyard, as showed here. We have more than 12 commercial vineyard or wineries in this project collaborated. A few wineries we listed here. For each wineries, they have a different crop load level, at least 2, and some wineries have 3 crop load level, labeled as high and medium and low. With low thinning means it's not a thinning at all. It's a very heavy thinning, high thinning. Typically, we keep at 1 cluster per shoot. The multiple years data has been collected. The wine was made commercially and sent to the lab for analysis. So we did a number of analyses looking for the composition of the wine. For example, the typical analysis we are looking for the wine phenolics. We measured it by the UV visible absorption. We also measure individual phenolic compounds by HPLC, as well as we measure the total monometric anthocyanin. This is a very basic measurement. We want to have an idea with the crop thinning, what those change and might be. Well, I just want to show one example because of the time. We cannot go to the detail of everything. Just to give you an example, and in vineyard E, what we see is a different phenolics and response differently with crop thinning. This is the 4 years of data. So the conclusion is this: the compounds is basically the changing is heavily is year dependent as well as vineyard dependent. The no thinning, what we find is for crop thinning did not affect the total phenolics in some wineries. For example, winery E and winery J, there's no impact. The no crop thinning resulted slightly lower total phenolics in some wineries, such as winery B in 2014, winery D in 2013, as well as winery G that also have some effect on 2015. The result is not really consistent. The crop thinning, really, when we look at the multiple years data, it's very difficult to make a conclusion. But from all of this data, what we can observe is crop thinning really did not impact the total monometric anthocyanin and in the wine. Although in some wineries, in some years, they have some change. But overall, we do not see a big impact. Well, the next big thing is we are looking at the volatile compounds. That's the major area. We did a very extensive study on the aroma compounds. We use multiple, in our lab, we use multiple method, depends on the compound we are measuring. And use the majority of the major volatile aroma compounds, such as the esters, alcohol, and the terpenoids. We rely on the technique called headspace solid phase microextraction and using GC mass spec for quantification. For some of the compounds like acetaldehyde as well as higher alcohols, we normally use a static headspace and GC use a flame ionization detector for the quantification. The reason is this, because they are highly volatile, they are relatively large amount, it get a much better, more accurate result. Now, furthermore, for compounds, it's more difficult to analysis, such as some phenolic compounds. We are using a technique called stir-bar softivic extraction and GC mass spec for analysis. And many of you have already heard many times previously, look at the basic platform in our lab we handle with flavor compounds. So in this report, I'm not going to go to any more detail. Now, for the quantification in our lab, and whenever we try to use stable isotope labeled internal standard for the quantification, use a different quantified ion, and for quantification to get a reproducible result. The reason we are using that example is we use, this is one of the esters, is ethyl hexanoic acid. This is the normal and ethyl hexanoid, and use isotope internal standard, and those proton here with replace with deuterate with so it's more stable, and we can use mass spec and to quantify it. The structure is identical for those compounds. So the behavior and very similarly. Now, with the result, we analyzed many esters in both straight chain esters as well as branch chain esters is here. And then those esters are given a fruity and aroma. Now, when we look at this result is here, this one example with ethyl hexanoid is the major esters. For all those esters we analyzed. So what we see here is the concentration of ethyl hexanoid. It varied in some wineries, in some vintages. However, we do not see any obvious trend related to crop load. So that is the conclusion from the esters. This same conclusion is also true if we look at the total straight chain acids and put everything together, and we do not see the trend either. Although for the individual winery and certain years, they may have a variation, but the trend is inconsistent, means the crop load is really did not change the esters concentration. The same is also true for the esters, for the branch chain esters, and we do not see that change. We do not really see the crop load impact the total branch chain esters. So, conclusion here is the crop load really did not change the overall and the fruity esters and formation. Now, for the red wine, we focused on beta-dimethanol, and that's a C13 noise, the prepenoids and a category, because they have a low threshold. It's important for the berry flavor. So we put a lot of focus on the beta-dimethanol in the both free as well as bound form analysis. Now, for the free beta-dimethanol, again, crop load, they may have a little bit of impact on the free beta-dimethanol. However, when we see it depends on the wineries, seems like they have some years and they may have some impact, but the impact is not huge. It's also, we observed is kind of interesting, even in the medium crop load, there's a number of years in winery B as well as winery E, and actually, the free beta-dimethanol is actually is higher. Whether this is actually true, we don't know, but because that is just a simple observation. Even you say slightly higher, it's not like a huge improvement, just a little bit. When we look at the total beta-dimethanol, and here in this case, we do not see that trend in the wine. So basically crop load, we do not see the impact the concentration of total dimethanol in the wine. The other compound we're looking for is the terpenoids, and the terpenoids is not really that important, but at a low. But when all of those combine, all of those terpenoids, they may still affect the flavor of the wine wine quality. The terpenoids did not affected by crop load. We see all those wineries at years, we hardly see any trend. Well, as I said, we have many collaborating wineries. I just showed a few. When we put all those wineries data together, and we try to find to see if there's any coordination and going on with analysis, is really there's not most wineries had no significant correlation with crop load with those compounds. For some compounds, we may say, yes, they may have some kind of coordination, but coordination is negative. And this including TDN and VD-spirin, which normally consider is negative to the quality of the wine. Well, that's in the wine side. In the 2018 and 2019, we further look at the grape side. Look at crop load impact, and particularly we try to focus it on the both in the free and the bound form of C13 or norisopropanoids. So when we look at those data, and in both years, there's no significant difference with the crop load. In the vineyard G, there's a different vineyard. We may have some, but in general, there's no big impact. But in the some of the compounds in the some year, we may have some with nosin. We can see like a VD-spirin and a TDN slightly lower and a concentration. It's definitely with the clobazinin, we really did not see the impact on the beta-dimethanol and beta-inon, which is the two major compounds we consider is positive with to the aroma, and we do not see the impact with the crop load. Now with vine at the edge, this is data I want to go through quickly to catch up at the time. And the vine at the edge, and again, no significant difference is here. Well, this is the PCA chart. I really cannot talk a lot about this as a different, this is from different year, vineyard G, and 2018, 2019. As you can see, there's a particular with the 2019, we have a big overlap, and we really cannot see difference. And either with vineyard D and 2019, we do not see any impact. And 2000 H. If we look at the grape and free form, and when we put multiple years together to see, do we see any trend? Really, there's no differences here. We try to use all kind of different techniques or statistical software, try to see if there's any coordination with the crop load affect different compounds. The conclusion is no, we really cannot see. This is a total C13 norisopropanoids. That is a little bit disappointing for me from our research, because originally I thought, oh, maybe, you know, with the clobazinin, we haven't believed this for so many years. We always think about with low yield, high clobazinin, it will create a better quality of wine. So in the flavor side, and I really wanted to see that big jump of excitement. We see that difference. But with everything we analyzed to every detail, we really did not see difference. So in the research side, and that is our result. This is also this is the research with Tomasino, Osborne, and Skinkis. They did a sensory evaluation. We try to put our analysis is independent. So I only get this sensory result and yesterday from Patty, because we don't want to create something like the bias with the data. So with the crop level and with the sensory, they did not see the difference by crop level. No preference with the crop level. They only see the difference by site and advantages. So that is the same conclusion, same result we observed. This is the 2000 exponent from 2013, 2016 wine. The in-house sensory, and then they look at a different sensory attribute and basically did not see difference. They also have two collaborators report 2018 to 19 report. So they really could not see no visual impact as a result, basically by increase this yield to say really did not see that huge difference. But regardless, they get a great yield with a medium thin seems is really preferred by this panel.
Thank you for your presentation, Michael, but you are at time.
Yes, and finally, and then just want to thank everybody, and here I'm done. For the funding, Oregon State and the major collaborator, James Elizabeth, and in my lab, and a graduate student, Jing Wen and Lin, and also Yan Ping with an analytical Armando postdoc.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Attendees, unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. So if you do have questions for Michael, feel free to join us in our breakout session later this afternoon. Thanks so much, Michael.
Okay, great. I stop sharing.
Yes. Okay, next up for our research presentations, we have Julie Pond from the Northwest Berry Foundation. Hey, Julie.
Hi there, folks. Let's see. I'm just going to figure out which screen is the right one.
Perfect.
Is that working for everybody?
Yes, it is. And I just want to make a comment that I do apologize for my audio issues. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop it into the chat, and Alex will be able to address your concerns. So without further ado, we've got Julie Pond.
Great, thanks, Greta. So I was working on a research project that the Northwest Center fully funded, and it was connecting breeders to producers, working on regional on-farm trials for strawberry selections. So these trials were completed in Washington and Oregon over the last 3 seasons. And these are for both fresh and processed market selections and new varieties that had recently been released or have the potential to be released. So the goal of this project was to have a collective open evaluation. There was a fall establishment evaluation, an overwintering and evaluation, and then a pre-harvest or harvest evaluation that happened in Pacific Northwest locations. This was to lessen the individual grower risk in planting new selections that haven't been proven in the region yet, and then going ahead and sharing that knowledge with the wider Pacific Northwest industry. So here's a list of the 3 seasons of plantings. I'm pretty tight on time here, so I'm trying to get you guys the information that you need in that short amount of time. I'll concentrate on the red font selections and varieties because they were promising in the region and trending to be promising with perhaps another growing season or 2. The highlighted purple font at the bottom here, those did not fruit during the project as they had just been planted this season. So the fruit will be coming off next season for the first time. So I'm not going to give those a thumb up or a thumb down today. And then the remaining names on this list are ones that either had poor performance or are trending in that direction during the duration of this project. When we're talking about standard varieties, we were comparing these to Hood as the fresh market, June Bearer, Tillamook as the processed market, and then Albion as the day neutral. So first up is Mary's Peak. This is promising for dual purpose needs. Color is ideal, though some growers commented about the more pronounced yellow achenes that were on the exposed side of the fruit compared to the standard. Flavor is very full, very sweet. This harvests probably a week after hood, and it's around similar time to Tillamook, though some growers were harvesting Tillamook slightly later than Mary's Peak. Fruit size in the first season was medium to large, but the second season is averaging more to that medium size with quite a bit more variability in that second season. The berry is consistently conical, and some growers in Washington didn't necessarily like that look. Yield, so I'm going to preface this. The yields were in season one were from last year, and yield across the board in both states were really low. So yield in the first season was 3.2 ton an acre and 4.3 ton an acre for the second season, which was this past season. General feedback I heard and also observed was good capping for processed runs, though this fresh market cap really as a possibility just as well. Washington growers are a little bit on the fence with this variety since it's just beginning to circulate up there. But when it comes to Oregon buyers and direct consumers, they are specifically asking for this variety. Processors didn't notice any characteristics that made this variety more or less desirable to run on the processing line. Next up is Future Crimson. This is also fitting that dual purpose category in both states. The color is medium to dark red inside and outside this fruit. The fruit has excellent flavor as long as it's picked prior to it getting too dark colored. It tends to have a wine flavor coming through. Sorry to offend any of the wine folks on this call today, but that's not usually what we're looking for in strawberries. So this was harvested around Tillamook time and Mary's Peak time, about 1 week later than hood. The size is in both the first and second season stayed really consistently medium to large, and the shape was consistent through both seasons also. Yield for the first season was 3.6 ton an acre average, and then 6 ton an acre for season 2. A few additional points on this. It has quite a thick canopy. Berries are found throughout the canopy. The caps did stay on well, probably a little bit better than the standard. And plants and fruit in this variety are a little more susceptible to powdery mildew on high pressure powdery mildew years. So that's really something to consider if your farm tends to have a little more battle with that on a given year. Processors, again, didn't notice any characteristics that were more or less desirable to run on the processing line. So now we're going to go into a few June berries that are trending to be good, but I think we need a few more seasons in the ground to really solidify how best they would fit in the Pacific Northwest. So Ruby June is trending as a good fresh market bear, June bear. It's got medium external color, a little bit lighter on the internal color side. Growers thought that this was sweet enough for their needs. It was definitely not in that hood caliper of sweetness though. Harvest for this variety really depended on the season. The first season of harvest was slightly earlier. Start with hood with a 10-day gap in between the first and second harvest. And then the second season, this started harvesting much earlier than that, almost around the same time as Sweet Sunrise for those that have planted that. And then the duration of that harvest was actually a lot longer than even the first season duration. The size was inconsistent. It ranged from small to large, but averaged as medium. The shape was really consistent though. Yield for the first season was 2.8 ton an acre, and then the second season was 5.4 ton an acre. The cats stayed on these berries well from a fresh picking perspective. Powdery mildew was only occasionally found to be a problem. I will say this needs a little more Washington reach for this trial, as this was one of the only varieties that was not tried up that far north. ORUS 3009 is up next, and this is also trending to be good. It is medium red internal color with medium to dark red external color. It's got a really pleasant sweet flavor. It harvests similar to Tillamook, with a little more of a heavy first pick, but a lighter second pick than, comparing it to a standard Tillamook, for example. The fruit size is medium to large, and that stayed pretty consistent, both in size and shape. Yield was 4.3 ton an acre for the one and only season that we actually, that it was producing in. And this seems to cap pretty similar to Tillamook. There was a Washington processor that, ran it through his processing line, and he mentioned that it lacks the firmness compared to a Tillamook going through the same line. I have no idea how those folks up in Northwest Washington are growing their Tillamooks. They are monster sized. And so this selection was really hard to compete with that, even though this 3009 had better color and flavor than that standard. The next good trending June bear with maybe a few more seasons under its belt would be ORUS 2486-1. This is a medium or a deep internal red color and then medium internal color. It was consistently sweet, comparable to Hood. The harvest was 1 to 2 days earlier than Tillamook. Size was a little more inconsistent on this selection than I would like to see when comparing it to the standard. It ended up being a little bit smaller, but averaged out to a medium size. Yield in the one and only season that it was in the ground for from harvest was 4.3 ton an acre. This one is a little similar to Mary's Peak in the sense that the canes, the yellow seeds on the surface, the exposed side of the surface tended to be a little more pronounced, and sometimes that can be a negative for some growers. This planting was consistently vigorous. In locations or in plots that had clearly root rot plots, this stood out to handling that a lot better than the Tillamook that was right in those same plot conditions. It capped well from a processing perspective. Again, running this through the line at the processor level, they did mention in Washington that it lacks some of that firmness that they wanted from Tillamook. And we were not able to process. This will only be fruiting next season for the first time in Oregon, just based off the number of plants that we were able to secure during this funded period. So there was no evaluation that happened in Oregon. So we're going to move on to two of the remaining selections that I found promising, but they're both day neutrals. One of them is Flora Beauty, and this had a medium internal and external colored fruit. The flavor is really sweet and very pleasant to most folks. A lot of them were saying it was comparable to Albion. Some growers actually preferred this flavor over Albion. The harvest started 5 days earlier than Albion, and it had a similar mid-season lull in production to the standard. The fruit size was slightly smaller on average than the standard. I'd probably say a medium average, but it did have some variability in size. It had more of a round shape than a conical shape, but it still stayed really consistent. And then the yield was dependent on the region. So in Oregon, this one had 40.8 ton an acre for the season. And I was considering all fruit picked that was not rotten and a 26,000 plant per acre plasticulture system. In Washington, it was 18.7 ton an acre, which was marketable fruit picked in a 9,000 plant per acre matted row system. So these plants were generally staying quite compact. And one thing that took some getting used to with this particular variety is knowing when it was ripe. So if you look at this photo, you'll see some white under the caps that kind of tended to linger, but growers were picking it, thinking that it was good to go. And it didn't have the flavor at that point. So when growers kind of got a little hitched up on that, but when they left it to stay so that the under the cap color was fully red, that had the best flavor by far. So once, you know, I think the second harvest round, growers started getting used to that, and you know, they were fine with it. The caps do fold up a little bit in this variety. There were a couple of days where it rained that I was out in the field and just talking to a couple of growers and comparing it to Albion. It didn't hold up as well on plastic with some rainfall on it as the Albion. Last day neutral that I'll discuss today is Lawson Canyon Nursery 86U60. This has not been released yet from their program. It has a light to medium internal color and a medium red external color. It's got a really rich, sweet flavor when comparing it to Albion. The start of this harvest was about 5 days later than Albion, but it had less of a mid-season lull than any day neutral that was trialed, but also the standard. The fruit size was consistently medium to large, which was slightly larger than Albion, and a pretty uniform fruit shape. The yield in Oregon was 44 ton an acre. Again, that's all fruit that was not rotting on a 26 plant per acre plasticulture, or 26,000 plant per acre plasticulture system. This had comparable runner production to Albion. It was by far the most vegetative selection of all of the day neutrals, and it was able to withstand a little more than on wet days. A little better than the other varieties, including the standard. This needs further reach with more trials and feedback in Northwest Washington, as there was only one Northwest Washington trial. Only one grower wanted to take this one on. So the yields on this, when looking at it from an Oregon perspective, they were by far the highest. So I do think it is worth pursuing, you know, from a growing perspective in the area. More fruit was picked in this particular selection than Albion on any given week in the season. So I wanted to thank everybody. I think I'm a little bit over time, but there might be time for questions. Thanks to the Northwest Center for fully funding this. All of these growers that put in, you know, at least one or more seasons of fruit from these trials, all of the nurseries with coordinating efforts, and then of course the breeders. There's a lot more research that went into this, and a lot of that was submitted or sent out with the grower bulletins that went out. So you're welcome to reach out with that information too.
Thanks so much for your presentation, Julie.
You're welcome. Is there time for questions at all? Does anybody have any questions?
You've got 2 minutes left for your presentation. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them into the question and answer box.
I know I went through a lot of information. It's kind of hard to glean it. There was a lot more, and I mean, with all these presentations, the actual full report will be listed on the website too, so you guys will have access to you know, it as you need it.
So it looks like we got a question from Dichrist, and he asked, all handpicked?
So yes, all of these were handpicked, both from a fresh and processing standpoint. So yeah, they were all handpicked.
Great.
It looks like Ted. Yeah, so I'll just read his question out here. How will you go forward with this research? So great question. We didn't submit for funding for this last cycle, simply because we were kind of running out. We get a lot of feedback from growers on what they would like to see going into the ground. And so we've kind of maxed out what can go into the ground at this point, and then what has come through the Clean Plant Network and is available to be even produced at the nursery level, to be replicated at the nursery level. So we are holding off until there is a number of selections that we can kind of put back into the ground for plots and hopefully receive more funding to do that. Any of the remaining trial plants that have been planted this year or are going to be second season next year will continue to be evaluated, at the grower level. But the way that it's, anybody is welcome to kind of go on, to visit any of these plots to take a look or receive feedback. But I know that I will continue to receive feedback. These grower collaborators have been really great about, providing that information.
Great. Thanks so much, Julie. We are out of time for your presentation. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, next up, we've got Lisa DeVetter from Washington State University.
Great. Well,
hey, Lisa.
Good morning. Let me start sharing. I take it you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Let me do also a visual. Can you see my slides?
I can.
Excellent. All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. Let me get in presenter mode here.
Perfect. I will just about to comment that, so the stage is all yours. Take it away, Lisa.
Thank you. So just to introduce myself, my name is Lisa DeVetter. I'm an associate professor of horticulture at Washington State University, based at the Northwestern Washington Research and Extension Center. I'd like to acknowledge also Dr. Joan Davenport, who is a retired soil scientist who has been collaborating on this project. She's based at the Irrigated Agriculture Research and Extension Center, and Ms. Gwen Hoheisel, who is a regional extension specialist, also very key and instrumental to this project. And they are based in Eastern Washington, where this project is taking place. I also would like to acknowledge a few other critical people, particularly this year, Maya Bloom and Jenny Suter, as well as Nate Stacy and Amit Bishen. Amit was the graduate student that was funded on this project. He graduated in 2019, so Maya and Jenny were really instrumental in helping carry on the work. And then Nate Stacy, who was a PhD student at the time and has been involved, also helped Amit and our team out with some of the analyses as well. So great to have those students contributing to the work. And I see some, okay, just making sure. I saw some comments, so making sure everything is working all right on my end. So let's begin by just highlighting the organic blueberry industry here in Washington State. Some of you might realize this, but for those that don't, Washington State is a leader in blueberry production, in particular organic blueberry production. We produce about 50% of the total volume of fresh market blueberry and 22% of the processed blueberry for the organic market. However, despite that scale, relatively little research has gone on for this important production region when it comes to nutrient management. Now, the situation is quite different on the west side of the Pacific Northwest, particularly at Oregon State, where Dr. Bernadine Strick's program has led a lot of impactful and important research on organic blueberry nutrient management. However, east of the Cascade differs, and so transferability of that information to those production situations is questionable, as the Eastern Washington condition has different soil characteristics. So the native soil pH is quite high, 7.8 is not unusual. Also, the soil is naturally low in organic matter. The climate is also quite different. It's an arid desert with high extremes, so low winter temperatures and high summer temperatures. Plant productivity also differs quite a bit. So the production in this region of the Northwest is very high, potentially suggesting that nutrient demand might be higher as well and justifying higher rates. And then the fertilizer sources that growers have access to or are interested in are different. So even looking at a number of different research questions that will help us fill information gaps on organic fertility research for this important production region, the one I'll be focusing on for this afternoon is looking at optimal sources and rates of organic fertilizer nitrogen in Eastern Washington. But I also want to highlight that with the student support that the Northwest Center provided and how it kind of just allowed the research to blossom, is that we also looked at the impacts of post-harvest nitrogen cutoff times in an early fruiting cultivar, that's Duke. And then we also have been collaborating on a project led by Dr. Scott Lucas at Oregon State University in Hermiston on management techniques to optimize soil pH and nutrient availability in blueberry, that's in organic systems east of the Cascade Range. And we also have Dr. Dave Brell at USDA, our scientist on there. So very thankful for those collaborations. There we go. So let's talk about what we know when it comes to organic fertilizer sources and rates. So what we've learned from Dr. Strick's research program is that blueberry cultivars respond differently to organic fertilizer sources of nitrogen. For example, and this was demonstrated in her recent publications, fertilizer had no effect on Liberty yields, whereas Duke performed much better with feather meal as opposed to fish emulsion. And depending on the contrast, there could be up to a 35% yield difference. Higher yields have also been associated with lower rates of fertilizer. So in some of the papers that she produced with established blueberry, the rates were 65 versus 125 pounds per acre of nitrogen. And the lower rates are probably better for cultivars like Duke that are sensitive to potassium in that they have less potassium content in the fertilizer, which can be problematic for certain cultivars of blueberry. And then I also want to highlight that electroconductivity, or EC, can also be an issue with other types of soil amendments. So it's something we need to be careful about when it comes to fertilizing blueberry, particularly organic ones. So that leads to the objectives of this particular project. I'll be spending time talking about the first objective, and that's to evaluate the effects of available organic fertilizer nitrogen sources and rates on blueberry plant growth, yield, fruit quality, and then soil chemistry within the unique production region of Eastern Washington. And the second objective was really rooted in disseminating project information, and that's in progress and ongoing. And certainly in 2020, we had to take a little bit of a backseat on this one just due to the pandemic situation, but we're looking forward to resuming that, hopefully when conditions allow. So let's talk about the experimental design. So this experiment was established in a commercial grower field that was also certified organic. The cultivar was Duke, and the experimental design was a split plot design and a randomized complete block. There were 12 plants per plot, and we had 4 replications. So in total, we had 48 plots. So our main plot treatment was fertilizer source. The fertilizer sources you see listed here. We have Wise Organic, which is a liquid fertilizer. We have blood meal, we have true fish emulsion, and then we have a combination, which was 40% blood meal and 60% Wise Organic. And the rates were 50, 100, and 150 pounds per acre of nitrogen. The plants were 4 years old when this experiment was established, and all of these fertilizer sources and rates were selected in partnership with growers in the industry that weighed in on this information. In addition, since we were looking at the effect of fertilizer nitrogen source, we provided supplemental phosphorus and potassium across all plots to keep those 2 nutrients consistent. And we applied 42 and 82 pounds per acre of phosphorus and potassium, respectively. So we collected multiple data. We looked at fruit data such as yield, berry mass, and quality, leaf tissue nutrient data, soil data, and vegetative growth data. I'll be presenting on a subset of these due to the interest of time, so that I can kind of give you a sense of the emerging trends that we saw with this project. Let's first look at yield. So what we're looking at on the right is yield. It's in pounds per bush in 2018 through 2020. What we saw over the 3 years, that yield was impacted more by year, less by our treatments, source and rate. And this is expected. The plants were in their 4th year when we applied the treatment. So we would expect that the yield would increase as the planting matured. I also want to point out there was a slight source by rate interaction at 0.06. The reason I point that out is that if you look a little bit closer at the data, particularly the source and rate data, we did see a trend that higher rates of Weizerg in particular was associated with lower yield. So this is something that, again, it's not statistically significant, but is something that we're going to be continually monitoring. Now, our yield effects over the year, you'll see 2019, we had greater yield relative to 2018, whereas 2020 was slightly less. And this might be due to some of the issues with our fertilizer sources and the high potassium content, which I will get into in a minute. Now let's focus on fruit quality data. So on this table, you'll see year 2018 through 2020 and our 4 different fertilizer source treatments at their corresponding rates. When it comes to average berry size, we did see that there was an effect due to year with higher berry size in 2018 and 2019. Firmness differed by year and rate just for the blood meal. So you'll see that at 100 and 150 pounds per acre of nitrogen, firmness was greater. And then firmness was also greater in 2019, which was likely associated with our earlier harvest time that we had that year. And then we didn't see any differences in total soluble solids, but TA differed by rate in our blood meal treatment, where it was highest in our lowest fertilizer nitrogen rate. Now I'm going to focus on the tissue nutrient data, and in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium. So for leaf tissue nitrogen, I want to point out that we did sample later in August, which is outside the recommended time provided by our extension resources from Oregon State University, but that was based on 3 years of data that Dr. Joan Davenport helped produce that showed that tissue nutrient levels stabilize at this later time in Eastern Washington. We saw main effects, we saw year effects, we saw 2- and 3-way interactions, but the general trend and take home, which I'm hoping you're able to see in the figure on the upper left, which is total nitrogen averaged over the 3 years, is that the total nitrogen did increase with rate, except for the blood meal and fish emulsion treatments at the 50 and 100 fertilizer rates and the 100 and 150 fertilizer rates respectively. That being said, the tissue nitrogen levels were within the proposed ranges from Washington State University, which is 1.25 to 1.75, considering a sampling in mid to late August. For tissue phosphorus, potassium, and calcium, we did see total phosphorus increase with rate, and it was greatest among the Wise Organic traded plants, which might be due to that Wise Organic being the only fertilizer containing a little bit of phosphorus in it, despite the supplementation that might have been a little bit more available and able to reach further into the root system for plant uptake is what we surmised from that. However, the range of phosphorus was within 0.09 to 0.11, which is within the recommended ranges. Potassium is really what I want to focus on here. It did increase over time, and that's what you're seeing in the figure on the upper right. So you'll see in 2018 through 2020, we have this notable increase in leaf tissue potassium levels. In fact, when we look at 2020, we see that the tissue potassium levels are exceeding the ranges both from Oregon State University and Washington State University. And this could have contributed to the reduced productivity in 2020. Calcium, it ranged from 0.7 to 0.78. These are on the higher end of the spectrum from what we typically see, or at least what I see here based on the western side of Washington State, but it is something we expect that is likely due to higher calcium content in the soils within this production region, and it's still within the recommended range. All right, so now I want to focus on vegetative growth parameters. What we're looking at here is shoot growth in 2018 and 2019. Measurements in 2018 started in June, whereas measurements in 2019 started in May, and they continued all the way through September at monthly intervals. And you'll see it's reported in millimeters. 2018, what we noticed is that Wise Organic at the 150 pound per nitrogen acre rate did have the highest shoot growth. However, that trend wasn't consistent or was not held in 2019. These data weren't collected in 2020 with the pandemic situation and the intensity of these data collection. This was one variable that we just couldn't continue forward with. And then when it came to WIP production, we did not see any differences in WIP production across the treatments. Now let's look at the soil data, and I'm going to be focusing on the PRS data. And these are plant root simulator probes. They're ion exchange resins that allow us to look at the release of, in this case, ammonium and then also nitrate. This figure is showing us ammonium. Now we only installed these in the treatment that was applied at the 100 pounds per acre of nitrogen rate. And you'll see these data for 2018, 2019, and 2020. The main thing that we noticed is that overall ammonium levels are quite low in the soil, which was really surprising, particularly when we compare it to our nitrate levels. So now what we're looking at are PRS nitrate levels, again, 2018, 2019, and 2020. What I want to point out is that we're still analyzing these data. We did see peak levels correspond to when fertilizer was applied. However, again, the take home here is that the nitrate levels were rather high, which is surprising because when we think about nitrification, we know it's affected by soil temperature and moisture and pH, with lower pHs inhibiting nitrification. So again, we were surprised to see the high levels of nitrate relative to ammonium. However, the average, well, and to point out to you, just the average soil pH in the system across the plots was 5.5, and the irrigation water was also acidified. So what we're surmising or speculating here is that the high PRS nitrate levels could be due to the persistence of nitrifying microbial communities that could persist. A lot of this land that we're working on for these trials, or that organic blueberry is in, was previously orchard crops, which didn't require such acidic soil conditions. So those communities could persist in microsites within the soil or these protected microbial structures. So that might be contributing to the nitrate levels in the soil. We also looked at our different fertilizer sources, and you'll see the figure on the bottom there. For True, Blood Meal, and Wise Organic, we did see more ammonium than nitrate in the fertilizer product, except for Wise Organic. Not necessarily sure that that contributed to our higher nitrate levels, I think, because it's more than that based on the data. And then the other thing I'd like to point out is that Wise Organic does have higher EC levels. So we're really getting cautious with this particular fertilizer when it comes to blueberry. So our conclusions and our take-home messages to date is that Duke appears less sensitive to fertilizer nitrogen sources and rates based on our yield data, but this might be due to potassium and phosphorus being consistent across the plots. So there might actually be a fertilizer source effect, but again, it's being masked by the supplemental P and K. That being said, what we're seeing in this project, as well as with others, with Wise Organic in particular, is a little bit of a warning sign about utilizing fertilizers with potassium. And this isn't necessarily new. This is something that Dr. Strick and others have looked at as well. But we are cautioning growers about Wise Organic and fertilizing, particularly at these rates, because it can increase potassium levels and could be detrimental. We're very fortunate. We received continued funding from the Northwest Center to continue this research within these plots so we can generate some long-term data. We plan to stop phosphorus and potassium fertilizer applications and look more at the fertilizer source effect as opposed to the fertilizer nitrogen source effects. Also, we're pleased that we have Dr. Gabe LaHoo, who is a soil scientist working in blueberry systems at Washington State University, joining our project team. So in addition to the data that we have already started to collect or have been collecting for the past 3 years, Dr. LaHoo will also be looking at net mineralization rates measured in laboratory incubation studies under field representative moisture and temperature conditions. And that's something that a lot of growers have been interested in learning more about within these particular systems. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier on with regards to Objective 2, we plan to continue on with information dissemination. So that being said, I'd like to acknowledge the grower cooperators who have been involved with this particular project and providing input along the way. All of the assistance from some of the individuals I've already mentioned and more. We had a lot of graduate students and students that have helped out on this project. Also, I'd like to thank Dr. Bernie Strick for her input and expertise on nutrient management and organic blueberry systems. And then, of course, I'd like to acknowledge funding provided by the Northwest Center for Small Fruits Research, as well as funding provided by the Washington Blueberry Commission. So with that, I believe I hopefully should have some time to answer some questions, but I know a lot of us might be hungry for lunch too. So
You do have, thanks for presenting, Lisa. You do have 2 questions down in the question and answer box.
great. So I see Chris question first, and it was all irrigation, was all applied through drip irrigation. So just to clarify a little bit more, there were 2 lines of drip irrigation underneath weed mat in these plots. What we did, as opposed to inject the fertilizers in, is that we hand applied every 2 weeks the liquid fertilizer products around the base of the plant. That's something that our grower cooperative want to do. So quite intensive, but that's what we were able to do. And then the other question, let's see. I'm just scrolling up here.
Yeah, Lisa, if instead of using the chat, you'll see Bernadine's questions in the Q&A.
Okay. It might be because I'm in screen share. I'm not seeing that.
Oh yeah, you can stop screen sharing and you might be able to see the display better down at the bottom.
Yep. Okay. I'm still not able to see that, which is, let's see. Yep, I'm not getting it.
There you go. Do you see them down at the bottom now?
I do not see it.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Okay, there, it just popped up. Okay.
Perfect.
So 2 questions from Bernadine. Since tissue nitrogen increase with rate in blood meal and fish, but not significant effect on yield, can we assume leaf nitrogen was not correlated with yield? That's kind of the assumption we're operating right now, is that we're not seeing leaf tissue nitrogen with yield. Oops. And then could high nitrate and drip irrigated nitrogen sources be the result of these high pH soils with weed mat and drip irrigation, moving nitrogen fertilizer to the edge of the wetting front where soil pH is higher, leading to more rapid nitrification? Yeah, that's a very good consideration too. And that's something certainly to consider as we kind of unwrap and unpack these data and what we're seeing. Okay. And then another question, are soy fertilizers used much in Eastern Washington, other plants to evaluate? So I would say within the past 18 months, we've had more interest in soy fertilizers. Right now, I'm not aware of growers utilizing them. 2020, though, I've been a little bit disconnected due to the pandemic. So we're aware of the soy fertilizers. We're certainly interested in the soy fertilizers, but I'm not right now presently aware of growers using them.
Great. It looks like those are all the questions we've got for you, Lisa. So thank you so much again for presenting.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and comments.
Okay, great, everybody. Thanks for sticking around until the end. Before we head off for lunch here, I'll just do our giveaway. So again, shout out to all of our sponsors for the conference for allowing us to be able to purchase these giveaway prizes. So this giveaway is a $100 gift card to Compass Wines, and the winner for this package is Jaden Chrisman. So Jaden, congratulations. I will be following up with you later this week for you to get your prize. And so thank you for everyone for attending this morning's session. We will be back at 1 p.m. this afternoon for our final research presentations. So we are going to end this webinar now. You'll just sign back in once we get closer to 1. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you after lunch.